So today I picked another sutra to discuss. The name of the sutra is Fearless. For things about this fearlessness, I will read the sutra first. Then the Brahmin Janussoni approached the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. Then sitting to one side, he said to the Blessed One, Master Gautama, I hold the thesis and view that there is no one subject to death who is not frightened and terrified of death. Brahmin, there are those subject to death that are frightened and terrified of death. But there are also those subject to death that are not frightened and terrified of death. Number 1. And Brahmin, who are those subject to death that are frightened and terrified of death? Here, someone is not devoid of lust, desire, affection, thirst, passion, and craving for sensual pleasures. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he thinks, alas, the sensual pleasures dear to me will leave me, and I will have to leave those sensual pleasures. He sorrows, languishes, and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes confused. This is the one subject to death who is frightened and terrified of death. Number 2. Again, someone is not devoid of lust, desire, affection, thirst, passion, and craving for the body. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he thinks, alas, this body dear to me will leave me, and I will have to leave this body. He sorrows, languishes, and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes confused. This is one subject to death who is frightened and terrified of death. Number 3. Again, someone has not done what is good and wholesome or made a shelter for himself, but he has done what is evil, cruel, and defiled. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he thinks, alas, I have not done anything good and wholesome, nor have I made a shelter for myself, but I have done what is evil, cruel, and defiled. When I pass on, I will meet the appropriate fate. He sorrows, languishes, and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes confused. This too is one subject to death who is frightened and terrified of death. Number 4. Again, someone here is perplexed, doubtful, and undecided about the good Dhamma. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he thinks, alas, I am perplexed, doubtful, and undecided about good Dhamma. He sorrows, languishes, and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes confused. This too is one subject to death who is frightened and terrified of death. So it seems like the four of them has the same description, same teaching, but there are slight differences of those four explanations. We can go one by one. So then we have the opposite of it too. First one is the person is not devoid of lust, desire, affection, thirst, passion, and craving of sensual pleasure. Simply, the person has not overcome or tamed himself or herself in these defilements. And there is a time that person is going through a severe and debilitating illness, a serious sickness, and that person thinks this all the pleasures, sensual pleasures that I was having is going to leave me. Simply, there is a fear I'm going to lose what I was having. Then that person has that much craving or desire that driven by the delusion. Because of that delusion, he does not understand those things subject to change, and this is what is the nature, and therefore he sorrows and he laments and he grieves, and the person weeps and grieves by beating his breast and totally confused because the person is losing the pleasures and he doesn't want to lose anything. There's a fear. There's a fear to lose. If you remember, we have talked about this, why we have fear because of the pleasures, sensual pleasures, because we don't want to lose these pleasures. Then when we are losing it, then we lament and we sorrow and we suffer. And there's a frightening, there's a fear, there's a terrifying of death, because that person could be about dying or about to die. Then when that person feels it, he thinks, oh, I'm going to lose, then I'm going to leave those things. And there's a fear. Because fear of losing, fear of dying. The reason is that person has not made his mind strong. We don't want to lose our pleasures, simply our comfort zone. When it is changing, we have so much suffering. Even these days, the weather is fluctuating. Now we have so much suffering, right? We need more clothes, and we don't want to lose the summer. Nobody is waiting for winter, except a couple of people sometimes. There could be sometimes waiting for the winter. The bears will be waiting because they can hibernate and they can sleep. Then the number one is describing the fear of losing the pleasures, sensual pleasures, simply our comfort zone. We don't want to miss it. Then we have fear to lose it, that directs us to have the fear for the death.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So I can see the fear of the death. So it's the loss of the pleasures, which is their happiness. So they're losing their happiness.
Yes, that is sensual happiness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Temporary.
Yes.
Impermanent. I know. Yeah. Okay, but they don't realize it.
No, because the person who does not understand the reality or the real nature of the life and this journey, then that person doesn't have any understanding of it, right? Then the person knows only that sensual experiences. The only thing that he knows is these pleasures. Then if the person doesn't know this is going to change and this is subject to change, nothing is permanent, then there's a fear because of there's no any understanding, because that driven by the delusion. So that's the danger of this life. And if the person knows, then there is no fear. In the other section, other part of the teaching, it describes. Number 2, the different is, now the first, number 1 was losing the pleasures. The number 2 describes losing the body as well. Then the person's body is decaying and losing weight and losing strength, and all the energies is going, leaving. Now the person knows, or the body also departing, dying. Then that sorrow, lamentation and fear arise there. The fear of losing of the body. The losing of the body means the person is going to lose the life. Simply before the death, we will be losing our energy, right? And no more functional. And we will need a cane. We will need a support. We will need a wheelchair or the walker. And we will have to find another person who can take care of us. Then we have that fear, because we are losing the body also. The fight, it is uncontrollable, right? And we have that fear. Then that directs us to leave the life as well, because then we panic and we terrified and we afraid of losing the body as well, simply to have the death. Number 3 is, if the person has not done any good deeds, wholesomes, and that person knows the destination, the fate, there should be some understanding of that person to know it. And he thinks, oh, I haven't done anything good, or I haven't trained myself, then there will not be a shelter for me. There will be a shelter, but it is not a happy shelter. Then what it describes, I will meet the appropriate fate, means I will have the yield as I cultivated. So by thinking that, by seeing that fate, that person can sorrow and lament and grieve, weep, because he knows the future will not be happy. Then again that person has fear to die because of seeing the future, thinking of the future. Then he knows the future won't be happy, then he doesn't want to die. Again, fear comes before we die, and then we are frightened and terrified and panic and don't want to leave. And with the 4th one, we need to be a little bit careful when we describe it, because sometimes this doesn't work for everyone's if the person does not follow the teachings of the Buddha or the belief of the Buddha. Someone here is perplexed, doubtful, and undecided about the good Dhamma. Simply, if the person doesn't have the right view, and there is no path for that person, and if the person is carrying that wrong view, then his path is in a wrong direction. So that person doesn't have any development or any understanding of the Dhamma, or simply Dhamma is the nature, this actual nature, because we all are against the nature. Therefore, there are many doubts and skepticals. Then we don't know how to be, not to be unconfused. Most of the time we have many confusions of the Dhamma, and sometimes we don't know how to define them. So therefore, if there is any doubt of the Dhamma as a practitioner, then we need to clarify those things and we need to be clear. And if the Dhamma is not clear for the person, if the nature is not clear for the person, then that person should come to a right view, to be clear. Otherwise, that if that person holds the doubt until the death, then his death will be confused. There won't be a happy destination for him then. Yeah.
Yeah. The same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Finding reason.
Skeptical doubt.
Skeptical doubt.
Yeah. It is not about the doubt about the here and there. It's about this practice. Then I will read the opposite of that teaching. I will read only one, then we can go through the teaching because the same thing is repeating here. Again Buddha said, and Brahmin, who are those subject to death that are not frightened and terrified of death? Number 1. Here someone is devoid of lust, desire, affection, thirst, passion, and craving for sensual pleasures. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he does not think, alas, the sensual pleasures dear to me will leave me, and I will have to leave those sensual pleasures. He does not sorrow, languish, and lament. He does not weep, beating his breast and become confused. This is one subject to death who is not frightened and terrified of death. So the person who does not devoid of lust or these defilements, then that person has fear to lose the pleasures. And the opposite of it is if the person has devoided of lust and desire of and all the defilements, even though that person has going through serious sicknesses or any illnesses, and that person's mind is strong and firm and established, that person has an unshaken mind, then there is no fear, there is no sorrow, there is no lamentation of losing these pleasures, right? So because he has made his mind is unshaken, stilled and calmed and relaxed and tranquil. No fear, no terrifying, no being afraid of, no panicking, even there is no any shakenness, because the mind is stilled, firmed, well established. Maybe that person does not come to the end of the practice, but beforehand, if the person has the ability to develop and if the person is developed, then there is no fear, there is no terrifying. Then the number 2 is, again, when the person has overcome or controlled of the senses, and if there is no any defilements within him, and that person knows the actual nature of the body, and when it is changing, there is no any lamentation or suffering. There will be suffering because of the feelings, but the person does not sorrow, lament and grief, because he understood the nature of the body and he knows this is subject to change. Then when the person's mind is still and there is no terrifying or there is no any sorrow or any fear to lose it, therefore for that person there will not be any frightened or terrifying of the death, because he is ready to live, knowing the nature of the life. The number 3 describes that person has made a shelter for himself, and he has done good deeds and wholesomes and committed to do all the good things. So therefore that person has not done anything evil, anything cause to suffering, and he knows because of his goodness he will meet an appropriate destination in the future. then there will not be any sorrow, languish or lamentation for that person, and he will not be confused of his death, and he will live happily, and there will not be any frightening or terrifying of the death because of the stillness of the mind and the good behaviors of the person. Number 4, someone is unperplexed, doubt-free, and decided about the good Dhamma. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he thinks, I am unperplexed, doubt-free, and decided about the good Dhamma. He does not sorrow, languish, and lament. He does not weep, beating his breast, and become confused. This too is one subject to death, who is not frightened and terrified of death. The person's path is clear, and he has right understanding of the Dhamma, and there is no doubt, there is no skeptical doubt of the path. Then mind is still and mind is clear, and he can die happily because he's not confused. That's what we need, because even though some people practice, sometimes they have that perplexity, and sometimes they have doubt, and they are unsure about their path. Then that shouldn't be there, because Buddha talked about that. There was a conversation with the Buddha and someone else, and that person complained, I practiced loving kindness as you mentioned, but still I haven't overcome my anger. Then Buddha said, if you have practiced as I taught, there shouldn't be anger. If you say you haven't overcome your anger, it is not about the teaching then. It is about the application. If you applied it as I taught, the anger shouldn't be there. It's like if we prescribed by a doctor and we get the medication, but we don't follow the guidance, right? We just use it, we get the medication as we want, maybe here and there, on and off, and the sickness will not be cured. It could be rotten, right? The sickness could be rotten accordingly as the doctor prescribed and guided us. If we did not take the medication in the proper manner, then we cannot complain to the doctor, because it is not about the doctor, it is about our application. Then if the Buddha is a doctor, then if he guided us, then we have to follow what he taught. Then if we followed it, there shouldn't be any confusion, doubt. Then we don't want to complain then, because we are in the path and we have the results. It's like one day a person came to the Buddha and asked, there are thousands of students of you, and everyone comes to you and question. Then he asked, do they follow as exactly you taught? Buddha said, well, what do you think? If a person comes to you and asking a direction to a certain city, then you will explain the direction with landmarks, and you give the right direction. Even though you gave the direction, if that person does not follow the direction, and if he goes here and there, that person will not meet the destination. Then Buddha asked, that person does not follow the direction as you guided, and is that your problem? No.
Your fault?
No, it is not. It is not your trouble, or it is not your fault, right? It is about his fault, because he does not follow. Then again, a second person comes to you and asks the same direction to the same destination. He follows. He exactly follows what you said and what you guided. Then that person will meet the destination. That also not your matter. That is not your result. It is his result. Because you guided and he met the destination. Then Buddha said, yes, I meet number of people, lay people and ascetics, and some of them follow, some of them not. Then it is not my matter. So if someone follows, then that person will meet the destination, otherwise not. So it is about the practitioner, it is about the follower, it is about the person who practice. It is not about the teacher. It is not about the path. Path is there. We have to just go through it. So, in order to be fearless, we need to purify ourselves. Any thought?
Property, some other stuff, possession. Maybe when we get a certain, we have to be like a deep belief in Buddha's teaching, and then when we practiced many years, I think when we get a certain age, we can
maturity.
Yeah,
You need the maturity to understand the life.
Understand life and
You see it happening many times, good things and bad things and wrong things and right things, then so you see it as it is, right?
Yeah.
Well, again, not only about this being matured physically or mentally. It's about the maturing of the practice.
The practice.
Yeah. Because even though we are grown people and we are matured in the life, if we can be babies, we can be kindergarteners in the path.
That's true.
And we have to mature in the path, in the practice. It's not about the physical maturity. It's about the mental maturity. But yes, sometimes there are some, even at the Buddha's time, there were very young people who gave up all these physical and material aspects, and they understood their life. It's about the wisdom.
Right way. Yes, it comes with your parami or something.
Yeah, and again, if we have that understanding, if we have that wisdom about this reality, the real nature, then even in this life, even now as practitioners, we have kind of letting go many things, right? Number of things, and we are keeping what is most necessary to us. But we don't want to say we have totally let go, but we have some kind of refraining and training ourselves, and we have some sort of taming ourselves. We are kind of tethered by these materials, but still we can let them go, right?
Of course.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no doubt.
They're
It's about the person.
craving level. They're very low craving level. That's easy to let it go. It's very heavy craving. It's hard to.
Yes, and again, it is not about having materials. Doesn't matter how many materials we do have.
Craving.
It's about the heart. It's about the mind. It's about our authenticity.
Craving.
To let go. We can have these materials. It doesn't matter, because how many temples that Buddha had, right?
None. Not belongs to him.
He was offered
He has a lot
of temples,
of people offer, but not
right?
belongs.
Monasteries, but it's just for temporary purpose, to live, just a shelter.
They already gave up.
Not only that time, actually, even today there are many people who give up their wealth, their properties. Letting go should happen understandingly. It is not about just, okay, I don't want this and take it. It is not letting go. I gave it because it is useless to me.
That's right. Lot of
Somebody said, and I can't remember who, I never remember who said, so when you're letting go, you start off by letting go of the things you don't want, of the things that you sort of want but you don't really need, and then you have to start letting go of the things that are really important to you, and let go of that. And that to me is the letting go of the body, because that's the self and that's important. Well, I don't care, but isn't that what he's saying in number 2, that you have to let go of what you consider to be yourself, which most
Yes.
of us think of our body as ourself.
It is, because it doesn't mean we just let go this body, because we cannot let it go as we want, because it has its own karma. Then we have to use of this karma until we pass. Then during that period we need to make our mind, when the time is right and time is ready, to give it up.
be ready to go.
Yeah.
Leave this body and go.
Interesting thing is, whether we ready or not,
It goes.
it will leave.
But you know, when I've been present with people that have died, most of them have come to that understanding that they're ready to go, and no matter what.
Yeah, the understanding can be at the last moment too.
Yeah.
But the person should be very conscious about it, and the mind should be very strong to understand it. The thing is, if we haven't made the mind strong, then it's doubtful whether we are able to do it or not at the last moment. But when we understood this body is unfunctional, it is not ready to
Can't revive.
to survive or to carry on this journey, then the person just give it up, right? Even that moment is better. But the thing is, we need to be strong and practice ourselves beforehand. We don't want to, and we should not wait for the last moment, because we don't know when this body going to chop.
Get ready every day.
Yes.
Yeah. because-
Every moment.
Yeah.
Every moment is the practice. Aren't those experience the real practice or the real experience for us to think about it? Because all of those seeings and all these experiences can be a real lesson for us, because we have seen those things. We have seen this aging and sicknesses and decaying and decomposing, deteriorating, everything, right? But there's a hidden piece of it that we do not see it clearly. That's delusion. That's the ignorance. We know these things are happening, but we don't have that clearance, the clear mindset, or we don't have that clear wisdom to get the point exactly. If we get it at least one time, then we don't want to worry about it, because if we get it once, then we established there, and we have that understanding and experience. Then we have to improve it.
I think people are very afraid of aging, and they do everything to make themselves maintain youth.
That is physically, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
because
that's because they're invested in the
yes,
body.
and we don't. Yeah, so many expenses on this body, but we cannot say don't. But the thing is, we have to wash, and we have to clean the mind,
Yes.
not the really a body. These teachings about not about the body, actually, it's about the mind, purification of the mind. So
And there's no magic shower.
To wash the mind.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? Just
Open the skull and wash it out.
Yeah.
floss.
That's meditation.
Yeah, meditation.
Meditation.
Yeah.
It's a shower.
Magic shower.
Yeah. So medication is for the body. Meditation is for the mind.
Yeah.
And not just meditation, but living the path.
Yes.
I mean, if you can meditate till the cows come home in the future.
What
it's
you're
an
meditating about.
English expression, the cows
That
come
is
home.
the photo pass, another side, right?
Yeah,
Right.
You have to meditate with the right
Right
view and
right
understanding.
view and understanding, exactly.
Yeah. Mostly, actually, meditation is not about sitting, right? As we talk all the
Yes,
time.
Yeah, that's
It's
all.
about our mental and physical behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the path is about.
Full path.
Eightfold path. Then simply we call it Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sila is
Yes.
the moralities,
Yeah.
bodily and verbal behaviors. It is not just only simple behaviors, it's about the high levels of behaviors and all the refraining of all these verbal and physical misbehaviors. And again, Samadhi is a meditation. It's not just only sitting for 30-40 minutes per day, and it's not about having number of retreats. It's about the concentration of the mind. If we have that physical and verbal behaviors as sila, then that is the samadhi then. Because we are not making any unwholesome deeds, unwholesomes by using these words and the body. Then that purifies ourselves. Then there's a concentration from that. That calls samadhi, that calls bhavana, that calls meditation. Then with that purification of the mind and the body and the words, then there will be a wisdom. But still we have that right view. We start the path from the right view, then that will lead us for the complete purification.
It's interesting how things happen that you didn't really intend. I used to have a very foul mouth, and I haven't purposely tried not to swear, but I find that I don't anymore. I shocked myself the other day by swearing and went, oh, I don't do that anymore. So, but it just happened as a result of everything else I was doing.
Yeah. Well, there's a story. I use this story to teach to children, kids. There's this is a story from the teachings actually. There were two baby parrots, and one day they were in the nest, and one day a wind blew off them to a different directions, two directions, and one parrot fallen down to a monastery, the other one through to a thief's shelter. Then they were growing up in these two places, and one day the king of the area, he was hunting, and accidentally the king came across to this thief's shelter, and all of a sudden that parrot began to scream, killed and weep and chase away and steal so much harsh words. Then the king was frightened, and he looked around. Nobody was there, but the parrot was screaming. Then he went away. Another day, again he came for hunting. Then again he accidentally came to that monastery. Then that day, the other parrot began to it's kind of screaming and talking, like singing, right? And welcoming. He was welcoming the person and relaxing and greeting to the king and come and sit and eat and drink and relax. So many good words. Then he was so happy, the king. And he compared what had happened to these two parrots. They are parrots, but two behaviors. The parrot who is in the thief's area and thief's shelter, then he always listens and hears all these harsh and bad words. Then he trained himself to use these things. Then the parrot in the monastery always heard the pleasant words, noble words, friendly words, loving words, compassion. Then he trained himself in that way. So we also like parrots. When we associate ugly people, ugly means not physically ugly, verbally ugly, and who's keeping untruthfulness and slandering and malicious words and gossiping, then automatically we drag there, and we tend to speak those things. Then when we associate noble Sangha, then if that Sangha talks only good words, the truth, and no slandering, no malicious, no gossiping, only the Dhamma, then we tend to talk that way, right? So that's what happened to us. It automatically happens.